Okay, so from the Metta Sutta, these two paragraphs, the first one, may all beings be well and safe, may their heart rejoice. Whatever being they are, weak or strong, long and short, big, medium size or small, subtle or gross, though visible or invisible, residing near or far, though that have come to be or have yet come to be, may all beings be joyful. Let not let one not deceive or despise another person anywhere at all in anger and ill will. Let him not wish any harm to another, just as the mother would protect her only child with her own life. Even so, let him cultivate boundless thought of loving kindness toward all beings. Okay, so let's put the children in perspective with this sutra. We can see that uh, it's aligned very well with the way Buddhists view about the world and also our responsibilities as the leader of the community to protect our follower and the vulnerable member of the society, which is the children. Now, I also abstract this one from the Mahayana text. This comes from the Samantabhadra Bodhisattva 10 vows. So, perform good deeds for sentient beings. You have also make offering to the Buddha. So often this is how we understood. Say if Buddha is still alive and we ask him what you want so we can offer you. So I think the Buddha come to the world just to alleviate or free all sentient beings from sufferings. So if we do anything aligned with that, that's the offering we make to the Buddha. So very much talking about the safety and health for the children to overcome all the harm and also prevent them from getting harm. I think that is what in Mahayana text, according to this paragraph, we are make a great offering to the Buddha. Okay, so let's talk about the law of cause and effect. Cause and effect. So any effects have got a cause, and good cause bring about good effect, and bad cause will bring about bad effect. So the law have been around for a few years already. So the question I would like to ask here, but I probably will answer it anyway. Okay, should we be better off with or without this law? Well, without this law, that what have happened in the past. So this law is to prevent all those happen in the past not to happen again. All right. So this law is the result of a great effort of so many people who analyze the problem and come up with a solution and how to prevent further harm or to stop the harm and to rectify the situation as quickly as possible. Okay, so it's aligned very well with the law of cause and effects. Now, also in Buddhism, we talk a lot about dependent originations. So what have happened is uh, not just the government want to make more law. It's what due to the real harm, the real evidence, and the real suffering that the children are bearing or experience. So the law also coming from some of the solution. It worked very well. So it will help to stop the further harm to the children, especially those children that are under our care. So I think it's real. It's not just come from nowhere. All right. So it's something happened. Now this is the perspective from the Vinaya. often when we talk about Vinaya, we're talking about some of the things that restrict us from doing or not allowed to do, and some of the guide for us to be understood about the action that we are not to do or not to do. And often people think that Vinaya is something that restrict people from doing because you're not allowed to do this or not allowed to do that. But the Vinaya, some of the precepts should be understood as the freedom. Because in any constitution, in any association of people, when people come together, they either have written rules or unwritten rules. So but it's allow people to have a freedom to participate. So I assume this law is made for the people in Victoria. So for people to enjoy the freedom in Victoria, this is something that we need to observe. So if we observe this law, then we have the freedom to do activity or uh, to exist in the Victoria. So the Vinaya or this law, it create freedom for people to coexist together. So that should be understood in this sense. Okay, so sometimes when we're talking Vinaya, we're not just talking about uh, the very first precept for lay or for ordained member. I think the first precept is do no harm or not to kill or whatever, how we rephrase this Vinaya. It's precept. But there also the element about not doing. Sometimes not doing also cause a lot of harm too. So in this law is I think very much about the harm of not doing. If we know something and we don't do anything, the harm will still exist and it will continue uh, generate further suffering to the children here and there, present and into the future. So I think important to keep in mind, sometimes they not do harm, but would also imply that not doing also harmful as well. And we will understand more about what that means later on. And lastly, from the perspective of karma. So the action driven by intention, good deed deliberately through body, speech, or mind would lead to the future consequence. So karma could be bad karma or good karma. So here we do have a choice. It's all about the intention. Do we want the environment to be safe for the children? Yes. So is that the intention? If that the intention, then what we should do and what we should not do. Okay, so that will create the good karma and it will set the perspective for us to move forward. And I think the other member of the panel today will talk more in details about what is required of us who run the organization should be aware and we should do it correctly. Okay, so that's all of my opening. Bring in the Buddhist perspective about what we're going to do now. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Phuc Tan.
Thank you so much, Dai and Venerable Phuc Tan. That was really fabulous to hear that perspective on children's safety in Victoria. My name is Emily Sanders. I'm the Director of Regulation at the Commission for Children and Young People, and I'm here today with my colleagues Carly and Eleanor to talk with you. I'd like to thank you all for coming. Firstly, I meant it quite genuinely. It's lunchtime, and you are giving up some of your time to hear from us. So we're very, very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge that the land that we're standing on in Victoria was never ceded, and I pay my respects to any Aboriginal people who are with us in the meeting today. So in my role at the Commission for Children and Young People, I look after two very important sets of laws that are aimed at keeping children and young people safe. And these are the Child Safe Standards and the Reportable Conduct Scheme. So I'll be talking a little bit about those today. These are two schemes and two sets of laws that apply to religious organisations in Victoria, and so accordingly they also apply to Buddhist organisations. Before we start talking in detail about them, I just want to acknowledge that talking about child safety and talking about children being harmed can be difficult for us to listen to, and it can be very difficult depending upon your own personal circumstances. So if at any point during my presentation you feel you need to take a break, that's absolutely okay. You should do what you need to do to keep yourself safe in this discussion. It is important for us to have discussions like what we're having today. And in doing so, I think we need to acknowledge that the sorts of discussions we have with adults may be different to those that we have with children. So just in case any of you have got children in the room with you today, what we're about to talk about is meant for adults and not for children. So I'd be grateful if you could just make sure that children can't hear what we're talking about. We do have some really good resources on our website that are quite specifically written for children and young people to use and for you to talk about these matters with children and young people if you do want to do that. Today, when I'm talking about children, I'm talking about anybody under the age of 18. So that's a common question we get. What is a child for the purposes of these laws? Here we're talking today about anybody who's aged 17 and younger. So I'll talk a little bit first about who we are. So Di gave me license to correct and talk about the name of the organisation that I'm coming from, and we are from the Commission for Children and Young People. It is a bit of a mouthful, I will grant you that. So we turn to talk about ourselves as the Commission. And we are an independent statutory body, and that means we're set up under the law of the Victorian Parliament. And our role is to promote the safety and well-being and the rights of children and young people in Victoria. And it was really lovely hearing from Venerable Phúc Tan about some of the ways in which Buddhism conceptualises the role of children and also our responsibility as adults towards children and young people. I'm really thankful to have been able to hear that and for me to ponder that myself. So at the Commission, we have got lots of different roles and ways that we promote the safety and well-being and rights of children. Some of the ways you might often see one of our commissioners in the news is our role in oversighting the government's provision of services to vulnerable children and young people. So we look into how the government is caring for children in out-of-home care, for example, and we also look into how the government is dealing with children and young people in the youth justice system where they may have committed criminal offences. We also advocate for best practice policies and programs to make sure that the needs of children and young people are being met. We also promote the views and experiences of children and young people to make sure that their voices are heard, whether it's by government or by organisations such as yourself. And then we also have this role as a regulator. And in doing that, we're regulating organisations like yourselves that work with children and young people in order to prevent child abuse and make sure that organisations are responding appropriately if there are allegations of child abuse in organisations. So the quite specific laws that I'm here to talk about today are Child Safe Standards and the Reportable Conduct Scheme. So our role at the Commission is to help organisations understand those laws, but more importantly, to help you learn how to protect children and young people in your organisations. And that's really what these laws are designed to do. They're designed to help you take action to prevent child abuse from happening in your organisation, and to also make sure that you take the steps that you need to if a child is being harmed. So let's talk a little bit now about child abuse in organisations. And you'll see there, I've just got that very simple slide there, just to really sheet home what we're talking about here. And that is that all children have the right to feel safe and to be safe all of the time. Now, that's at home, that's at school, and it's also in religious organisations. That right goes with the child wherever they are in our community. And I know that you'll all join with me in agreeing that that right is incredibly important, and that you'll understand that we as adults in the room have got a very particular responsibility to protect children. We've got the power that they don't have to keep them safe. Now, safety doesn't just happen. You heard Venerable talking about some of that's led us to this point where we have these laws and we have these systems. Some of the very specific things that have happened is that we've had several inquiries and royal commissions, in fact, that have heard from whether it's children and young people or those who have survived abuse in organisations, who've let us know about their experiences, what's happened to them. And where we've had some experts really look into, well, how can we stop that happening in the future? How can we now protect children so that they don't experience harm and abuse in organisations? And that's what's led us to these two laws that we've got today. What we've heard through those inquiries is that where organisations don't take action to put in place policies, processes, systems, increase knowledge within their organisation, then the chances that something will go wrong and lead to a child being harmed actually increases. So if you don't take action, if you don't put systems in place, the chance a child will be harmed will increase. The other thing that we've heard very much is that when children and young people are not believed, when we don't listen to children and young people, then the likelihood of harm happening also increases. And when workers, volunteers, religious leaders in organisations don't have the right understanding to help them recognise and act on the signs of child abuse, then the likelihood of children being harmed increases. So there's some really important things there which mean that we have to take proactive action. We can't just wait for something to go wrong. We've got to do something to prevent harm and be prepared for if it does happen. We know that child abuse can take many forms and it occurs in lots of places in our society. We use that term child abuse broadly, and we use that term to cover not just child sexual abuse, but also physical violence, psychological abuse, neglect. So there's a range of harms there that we talk about and that we want to act to prevent. And I'll talk a little bit more about those a little bit later. I want to just acknowledge that the impact of child abuse is lifelong, and it can be quite devastating. Something which can be a moment of time when a child is young, that abuse happens, it has impacts that last for the rest of that person's life. And for some children and young people, that harm and that impact can be immediate, and for others that might emerge later on in life. And it can be deep and it can be complex negative impact that it has for them. It can impact their development as a child and going on into adulthood. The effects can be physical, they can be psychological, they can be emotional, they can be behavioural, and they can be social. And there's been a lot written about the particular impact that happens for children and young people when abuse happens in religious settings, because it also impacts their view of their faith and the view that they have of the faith-based organisations that they engage with, and that feeling of betrayal that we've heard from children when this abuse happens within the very institutions that are supposed to keep them safe. So how an organisation responds if these if evidence emerges that a child's been abused is vitally important. How you respond if a child comes forward to tell you that something's happened to them is really, really important, and it matters for the rest of that child's life. Encouraging children to let people know if they feel unsafe or to let people know if something has happened to them builds their trust, and it builds the likelihood that they will speak up in the future, demonstrates the organisation's commitment to keeping them safe. So I'll talk now specifically about a couple of those very specific inquiries that we've had into these issues. So in 2012, the Victorian Parliament conducted an inquiry called the Betrayal of Trust Inquiry, and they looked into the handling of child abuse in both religious and also non-government organisations. And that inquiry found very clearly that child abuse in organisations continues to occur, and it's not just an issue of the past. And I guess I can reinforce that because of what we see at the Commission. And unfortunately, we see every day allegations being notified to us, and very sadly, that abuse continues to exist. What this inquiry found was that organisations were inconsistent in how they protected children and in how they responded if abuse happened. Now, these findings were then also made in the National Royal Commission, which looked into institutional responses to child sexual abuse, and that Royal Commission delivered its final findings in 2017. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with what that Royal Commission unearthed. And so those two inquiries led to these laws, and these laws have been recommended for every state and territory in Australia. So what you're hearing about today is also law in New South Wales. It's about to be law in Tasmania. Some of these laws have been enacted in Western Australia, and there is national agreement from every state and territory that in some way, shape or form, these laws will exist across the whole of Australia. So where we come to now is that organisations such as yours that engage with children and young people have to comply with these laws. And the laws specifically pull out and identify that religious organisations have to do that. And that's religious bodies of every faith tradition in Victoria. So it's not just Buddhist religious organisations. So what I'll do now is I'll just start to talk in a little bit of detail about the Child Safe Standards and the Reportable Conduct Scheme. So the Child Safe Standards. There are 11 Child Safe Standards, and I'm not going to go through all of them today because we'll send you out some information after this and you can have a good read. The Child Safe Standards are a set of mandatory requirements that organisations have to act on in order to keep children free from abuse. And there are about 60,000 organisations, we estimate, in Victoria that have to meet the Child Safe Standards. You can have a little look on our website if you want to check exactly the sorts of organisations, but we're talking about here schools, childcare centres, sporting clubs, babysitters, all sorts of organisations that have daily contact with children and young people have to implement these Child Safe Standards. Now, they are designed to create effective practices in organisations. They're really aimed at prevention of child abuse, but also having good systems in place so that you know what to do if something happens to a child. They also help to create a culture of safety within your organisation. So this is not just policies and procedures, but the policies and procedures are really important. This also aims to create this idea within your organisation that children can speak up, they will be listened to, your workers, your volunteers, your religious leaders will know what to do, and that people are acting on a daily basis to create safety for children and young people. So there are a few particular child safe standards that I want to talk about today. Now, this is not everything you must do, but I want to just give you a bit of a sense of some of the things that you need to do and that you need to have in place under the child safe standards to make sure that you're properly preventing child abuse and making sure you've got systems to know what to do if an allegation comes up. So your organisation needs to have leaders in your organisation who are championing child safety. These leaders need to take planned steps to protect children. Now, I know we've got a range of leaders in the room today, so that's part of the reason I've popped that point there. It's really important. We'll come back to it a bit later in a bit more detail about what leaders need to do. But I think we all know from our experience in a range of organisations in society that leaders have a particular role in creating and maintaining cultures within organisations. And therefore, leaders have got a really important role to create a culture of child safety. And what we're talking about there is a clear message within the organisation that child abuse and harm will not be tolerated. And this culture must be embedded in all parts of your organisation. So while leaders lead, all of the staff and volunteers have got a role with that safety and creating that culture. So we need our leaders to drive strong leadership in child safety. Another important consideration in creating safety in your organisation is that the people who are working and engaging with children need to be suitable. Child safety should be addressed in every aspect of bringing on either new staff or volunteers in your organisation. This includes how you advertise your roles. It includes needing to conduct referee checks to make sure that someone in their previous roles has behaved appropriately with children. And you also need to screen people. Now, the children check is one really important way to screen people, but it's not the only thing you need to do to make sure that people are suitable. So that's a really important message. Working with children checks are very important and you need to have them, but it's not the only thing you need to do to make sure that your workers and volunteers are suitable. This requirement to screen also applies to your religious leaders. You need to make sure that you're looking at whether religious leaders are appropriate to engage with children and young people. You also need to have a code of conduct that sets out the sort of behaviour that is appropriate for people to have with children and young people. And again, this code of conduct needs to apply to staff and volunteers. It also needs to apply to religious leaders as well. So what this document does is it sets out what's okay when you're engaging with children and young people, but it also says what's not okay. So you need to have really clear guidance about how people behave and how they shouldn't behave. And this code of conduct needs to be available to the children and young people, to the parents, to the community members, so that they know how the people in that organisation are supposed to behave. You need to have a complaints process, a way for people to say, hey, I'm really worried, I'm concerned about the behaviour of this person. They need to be able to raise complaints. And so that process needs to be child-focused. And what I mean by child-focused is that children can actually make a complaint. They are empowered, they've got the information, and your process needs to be appropriate to deal with children. You need to be able to have something that respects the fact that they're a child and this might be traumatic for them. So how are they going to be supported? But also your process, your complaints process needs to actually inquire into the child safety issue and get to the bottom of if there's anything you need to deal with to make sure that you're keeping children and young people safe. And some of that comes under the reportable conduct scheme, and I'll talk more about that process in a moment. I want to highlight that the child safe standards is not a set and forget thing. You don't come up with some policies, send them around to everyone and that's it. It's actually something you need to do all day, every day. It becomes part of your culture, but you have to check back in on those policies and processes. Are they working? Do people know what they are? Do children know what they are? Something happened, last week we had a child safety incident happen. Let's see if our policies worked. Did everyone understand what to do, and did they help us protect children? So you have to check back on them and make sure it's all working. Now, these are just a few examples of the sorts of action you need to take under the Child Safe Standards. So we'll send around some information afterwards to help you see everything else. But I'm hopeful that you've got a bit of a sense of the sorts of things that you need to have in your organisation. I'm going to talk now about the reportable conduct scheme. So this is another law. So there's two schemes that we're talking about here, and the one I'm talking about now is the reportable conduct scheme. So the reportable conduct scheme started in 2017, and it covers about 12,000 organisations in Victoria. So a smaller number have got this additional obligation. This obligation is also on religious organisations in Victoria. So this applies to Buddhist organisations in Victoria. So under the reportable conduct scheme, organisations have to take some quite specific steps to keep children safe and deal with any complaints that come up. In short, the heads of religious organisations have to notify the Commission about any allegations that come up about their adult workers and volunteers. And the allegations I'm talking about here are where those workers and volunteers are alleged to have abused a child or have engaged in child-related misconduct. I'll talk about that behaviour in a moment and what that means. Notifying the Commission is in addition to your obligation to report to police. So you still need to do that. But as well as reporting to police, you also need to notify the Commission. And what happens is the religious body notifies us at the Commission about the allegations, and then the religious body has got an obligation to investigate those allegations and then tell us about the findings. I'll give you more detail about that in a moment. When we're talking about the people whose conduct is covered by the reportable conduct scheme, we're talking about the adult employees, volunteers, religious leaders, contractors, and office holders of your organisation. So if any of them are alleged to have abused a child or harmed a child, then their conduct comes in under the reportable conduct scheme. What the reportable conduct scheme also says is that the most important thing your organisation needs to do, the priority when an allegation comes up, is the protection of children. It's not the reputation of the person who's alleged to have harmed a child. It's not the reputation of the organisation. The most important thing you have before you is to protect children. So I'm not going to talk in heaps of detail about this, but I wanted to give you that sense of what are we talking about here? What's the sort of abuse and harm that is covered by the Child Safe Standards and also the reportable conduct scheme? So you can see there the 5 types of conduct. You'd expect sexual offences to be covered. There's also sexual misconduct, and that covers things like grooming and also some of those behaviours that are inappropriate with children, what we might call crossing professional boundaries. There's also physical violence, significant psychological and emotional harm. So that might be bullying a child or belittling a child. And there's also neglect of children as well. And all of that conduct, if any of that is alleged in your organisation, you must tell the Commission about that. We've got lots of resources and information, and you've heard me say that already, and I'm going to keep saying it, but there is so much information on our website to help you understand all of this, and I really recommend you have a read of the information about the sorts of behaviour that's covered, so you can more deeply understand that. The other thing to understand about what you have to tell the Commission about is it also covers historical abuse. So if somebody comes forward today and they are an adult and they say, this is what happened to me at a child at your organisation, then you also have to tell the Commission about that. So it does cover historical abuse as well. That can be a bit of a tricky area. So if anything like that comes up at your organisation, I really recommend you give us a call and we can talk with you about what's happened and what you might need to do. The other thing to understand is this also covers conduct. It doesn't matter where it happened. So it doesn't matter if it happened at your temple or if it happened in the home. At the end of the day, if one of the adults of your organisation, if one of your workers, your volunteers, your officials, your religious leaders is alleged to have harmed a child or abused a child, even if it's their own child, you must tell the Commission about it and you must act. The reason for that is that person is within your organisation, the adult is within your organisation, and you need to have a look at whether that person is safe to engage with children. So what we often get asked is, what do I need to do? Something's happened. And this is a really important system for you to get written down in your organisation so that people know what to do if an allegation comes up. The first thing I want to say is this is not optional. You've got a legal obligation to take action. This is not something which you want to sit down and debate about, should I do this or not? You must do it. It is the law. You must tell the Commission about these allegations. You must act. Obviously, the very first thing you want to do if you hear about an allegation that a child has been harmed is you must take action to keep the child safe. Now, I can't tell you what that is because it's going to be different in every situation, but the very first thing you want to do is think about, is the child safe? And you might need to take some action in relation to the adult who's alleged to have harmed a child to make sure they're not having any contact with children and that child is safe. So that's really, really important in the first instance. You also need to make sure that you tell police. If it could be a criminal act, you need to make sure that you tell police. And then you need to tell the Commission. So we want to hear about those allegations as soon as they come up. So within 3 days of you hearing about an allegation, you need to make sure that you tell the Commission. And there's information about how to do that, but we've got a web form on our website, so you can do it. You can type in the information, and that's how you can tell us. But again, if you're not sure about how to do this, it's very easy to just give us a call, and we'll help you, and we'll talk you through that process. The other thing that you need to do is then think about doing an investigation. So the organisation, your organisations, have an obligation to investigate and understand what happened. Now, you don't start that investigation until Victoria Police have given clearance for that, and that's very important. And we work with you to make sure that you know when Victoria Police have finished their investigation. But you'll need to think through, how will your organisation have a look into what happened? We've got lots of advice and guidance about that. And again, I won't go into too much detail today, but what I really want you to do is make sure you notify the Commission, and then you can give us a call and we can talk you through what are the next steps after that. The thing I want to point out as well is that I said before, we want to hear about the allegation when it first comes up. You don't investigate before you tell us, you just tell us straight away. Allegation happens, you tell us. What's really important is that it doesn't matter if you agree or not whether the abuse happened. You might think, gosh, I know that adult, I don't think that could have happened. That doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if a parent comes forward, if a child comes forward, if another worker comes forward and says, this is what happened, you need to tell us. And then you investigate afterwards, and then you find out what happened. So you have to tell us regardless of whether you believe the person or not. Now, looks like we've got someone who's got their microphone not on mute. Great, thank you. So what I want to leave you with is, and I've spoken a little bit today, what's really important to understand is the head of your organisation has got these important legal responsibilities. They need to be really clear about what they need to do under both the Child Safe Standards and the Reportable Conduct Scheme. They don't have a choice in these obligations. They are required to do it. So that's important, firstly, because they've got this leadership role in protecting children, don't they? So at the end of the day, the leader's got this role. They need to make sure their organisation is doing what they need to keep children and young people safe. People in the organisation will look to the leader, but also at the end of the day, we really want to help the leaders in organisations understand how to fulfil the obligations that they've got. So what's really important then is that you understand who is the leader in your organisation. I know that might sound a little bit silly, but at the end of the day, we know religious organisations will often have different kinds of leaders, won't they? Sometimes they'll have a religious leader, sometimes they'll have an administrative leader, a head of the board or a head of the committee. There can be different leaders within organisations. And what the Child Safe Standards and the Reportable Conduct Scheme ask you to do is say, well, who is that leader for the purposes of these laws? So I ask you to go back from today, have that discussion with your organisation, have a look at the definition of the head of the organisation under these laws and be really clear on who that person is. There is a way that you can engage with us if you're not sure. Sometimes there can be two people and you can't easily see which one it is. There's actually a process where you can nominate who that person is. So we can help you with that if that's your situation. So yes, go away, identify who is the head of your organisation. Contact us if you're not sure. And then what I want you to do is make sure that the head of the organisation knows what their obligations are. So we've just gone through a very quick summary of all of that. We'll send you some more information about that. But I think it's really important that that head of the organisation's got an understanding of what they need to do under Child Safe Standards and the Reportable Conduct Scheme. Not all of us in the Victorian community have English as a first language, and we very much understand that. We've got a lot of our resources translated, including into Chinese, Vietnamese, and also Sinhalese, but I think there's about 17 different languages that we have our materials translated into. So they are on our website, and we'll send some of those around after today. But there's also the opportunity to call us using the translation service as well if you want to have a conversation with us too. We can organise that. And we're a pretty friendly bunch. We do this sort of stuff all day. It's a really important part of how we see our role with religious organisations in Victoria, is coming to speak to organisations, answering questions, answering emails. So please make sure you get in contact with us if you want to ask any questions at all. And please go to our website to have a look at the information that we've got, and we will send around our contact details after that. So with that, I might stop the presentation now because I really wanted to leave a little bit of time for you to ask any questions or pose any comments. We're really happy to accept any conversations either in the chat, or you can bring yourself off mute and ask. And I just want to really thank you again for the time you've given us today and for listening so patiently as I've gone through quite a lot of information there.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Emily, for making the time to make this information available, which is so important for the safety of the children in our